Hello and welcome to my video. In this video, we're going to be going through Unlock Azure, Unlock Access with Azure Key Vault, and this is a continuation of the previous lab where we did Azure Blob Container to initial access, and this was based off the access that we got through attacking the static blob site, the website that was hosted on a container. And so if you want some kind of backstory as to how we got the initial access, I recommend you watch that video first. But yeah, let's get into it. So we start off with this user Marcus, and when we get creds like this, and we find a user with valid creds or however access you have, the standard methodology that I've created is the same throughout. And I'm going to show you that here today. I really feel like I encompassed everything through this methodology. And I hope that you follow along because it would really help your learning experience if you decided to make diagrams. But basically, within these diagrams, I make templates. And one of the templates I made was for initial access. And so before we get into the real values, let me show you the template. Where is this? Here we are. So let me explain the template before we start doing the kind of situational awareness protocol. So firstly, we have the user, and then as you can see, all these Windows symbols, they're for standard access. So like in this standard access, we're going to be accessing the main API endpoints of Azure in order to gain the different sorts of access that each one has. So you got Graph, which is like the people-oriented endpoint. It has access to the groups, the users, the Active Directory, things that they use and that they can own. And then we have the management endpoint, which is connected through, so the graph is obviously here, it's called connect MG graph. And then the management endpoint, which is connect AZ, and the commands for it are going to be similar, like get AZ and things like that, is this command over here. And the management endpoint is going to provide us with the access to the assets and the services, things like that. And then lastly, we have AZ, and AZ login. AZ pretty much provides access to both management and graph, and it's just kind of a very convenient library to use with situational awareness. Actually, it's not about convenience, it's actually about redundancy. When you have different things that do the same things for you in an attack path, especially in an environment where things are not very reliable, like Azure is not very reliable both for the attackers and for the defenders. Defenders could be setting policies that can be so easily bypassed just by simple things, simple little things like logging out and logging back in, refresh things that were supposed to be prevented through policies and caps. But because of this unreliability that Azure has, we need redundancy and we need to be able to do the same thing in multiple ways. And so besides these standard kind of logins that we do once we get creds, we also have the token, the kind of the realm of tokens for getting creds. And so what that means is that once we get creds, it's crucial to understand the available tokens that we can get. What are the access tokens that we can get? What is the basic building blocks that is available for this user in order for us to adequately map out what we can do, in order for us to even do things like sometimes we need the tokens, we need to make tokens, we need to make refresh tokens from access tokens in order to make access tokens for other API and do native API calls when our basic commands aren't working. Like it's that crazy where we have three ways of doing things, and then scenarios and circumstances will still come up where we need basic native API calls, and for that we need these tokens. Not only that, but these tokens are crucial for bypassing MFA, which is a regular thing that you're going to be doing learning Azure security, and in Azure pen testing as a whole. Manipulations of tokens is critical for you to bypass the standard protocols of making conditional access policies and getting around those conditional access policies that the defenders make. So now that we kind of talked about this template, why don't we go ahead and actually use it? And I did over here. So firstly, I also included the fact that we can check if these credentials are real. And it's just a convenient thing that you do once you get any credentials. And I'll show you here how it works. You simply just use this tool. If you don't have it, just look it up and then repeat the same command that I used. So I'll show you how it's used here. I'm going to copy paste it. Right, I forgot that this tool is malfunctioning at the moment. But basically, if this wasn't malfunctioning, or if you wanted to use a different tool, it would succeed and show you that the user is real. But yeah, you know, it is what it is. But anyways, let's just assume that it wasn't a false negative. Go ahead and do our logins. Not in our Kali, because the PowerShell of Kali is less reliable than the PowerShell of a Windows host. So go ahead and do our logins over here. Go ahead and restart this. So for me, I didn't have to insert the credentials just because I already inserted them prior to making the video. And then for the AZ login, we can include the credentials within the command. And then lastly, for the MG graph, we just include the scope of user read until we need a greater scope or a scope for something in particular that we want to access. So for now, it's just user.read. And now for the tokens, now that we got all of our standard access without any problems or MFA issues, that means we don't have to undergo the MFA bypassing protocol, which involves another template that I'll show you in the same video. In this same video, we are going to go through that. However, for now, everything is smooth sailing, and I will just show you how to get the tokens, because it's a crucial part of situational awareness. So here we paste this command. It's called find me access. You can get it on GitHub as well. Just look it up and use it like this. Use the token command, and successfully we got some tokens. So I'll explain briefly, just in case you're not familiar. I mean, this is the second lab of the Azure Labs in the platform, and so I don't expect you to know that much. We have an access token. Here we have an access token. The access token is what allows us to tap into the infrastructure, whatever service that is. And so what is this service that this taps into? It's in this variable called resource. The service or resource is called graph.microsoft.com. So this service is what I talked about earlier, which is that it's going to give us access to things like the users and things like the groups and all of that jazz. So aside from the access token, and in particular why we even use this tool, is to get this thing right here, the refresh token. So why is the refresh token more valuable than the access token? Well, that's because the refresh token can create access tokens for anything. That's right, for any service, except for the services and resources that are blocked through specific conditional access policies, as we'll see later in this video. So let me demonstrate the fact that you can use this refresh token and that it's valuable. Right here in the same template, I have the second command, which gets all the access tokens for all services. Using the same tool, you can just copy it and paste it. And you copy paste the refresh token. And this is the best part of the I love this part, and I love seeing the tokens just get dumped, and it's great. So now you have all these tokens which, although there's no multi-factor authentication for you to bypass through all this token manipulation stuff, we still have a means of accessing resources in multiple different ways now. Now with these tokens, we can plug these tokens into most libraries and start using those libraries without having to go through any sort of authentication protocols or anything like that. This has just authenticated for us already when we got that initial refresh token. And now that authentication is done. This means that once you get this, there is no need for you to go through any special kind of protocols like multi-factor authentication or any sort of defensive measures that the defenders put in place. Now you are done. You have authenticated, and this session is secured for as long as that refresh token survives. So yeah, this is how you get the tokens, and that is critical. But now that we have all of the access, before actually we start doing manual kind of commands and enumeration, I'm gonna show a little bit as to how to get a GUI idea of your surroundings. And it's convenient. I don't really do it regularly. I chose to opt out. However, in some scenarios where I need to look at something that a specific user can see, like for example, there might be a user who has a lot of read access, a lot of permissions to read a lot of stuff, a lot of resources, a lot of all of the users, all of the groups, things like that. Then I'll keep his GUI access on the side, just in case I want to go back and look at that real quick and try to connect some dots. But if you're not familiar, there are a few tools for Azure. I'd say the kind of tool pool of Azure is quite generous in comparison to other cloud services like AWS and things like that. But mainly the tool of preference, and the one that kind of seemed to work, is this called Road Recon. And so I have prepared the commands here in my little sheet of Azure commands. If you want it, just message me anywhere. And yeah, let's go ahead and put it in here and see what we find. Put it right there and add it. Let's see, it's already up here. What's that? So once that launches, it just auths for us if everything is smooth. Obviously, it'll be a little bit more difficult if there is MFA in place. But Road Recon should have a few options of authentication if you really want to use it. So we got the caps. So caps.html is included in this set of commands, and I'll tell you why. These are the policies of how users can sign in. So basically, if you're trying to sign in to a different user after getting this page of caps, this page of conditional access policies, then you can come back here and look at, okay, let's see the user then that we're not able to sign into. Let's see Peter Parker. why am I not able to log into Peter Parker? Well, let me read his CAPS policies. It shows you that MFA is required. Where is it? MFA is required on platforms of Android, iOS, Windows Phone, Mac OS, and Linux. And so if you see this and you try and you have the creds for Peter Parker, you can't get in. Well, all you have to do is be on a platform that aren't these ones. And so what they taught us in Pwn Labs is that we can use platforms that are very random, like PlayStation 5 and things like that, and we can spoof our request through just simple extensions. You can spoof what your platform is, and suddenly you can become a PlayStation 5 and get through multi-factor authentication. So that's the story of caps.html. But now let's look at Road Recon. So to get to Road Recon, obviously you go to the port that it created for you. So going to port 5000, we now have access to the GUI situational awareness dashboard. Okay, over here we're going to get a kind of a rundown. How many users? 82 users, 29 groups, 42 applications. And this is real. Like, we can go here to users and see all of the users. Go to groups, all of the groups, devices, etc. And so that is how you can use a GUI to get situational awareness. I'm not going to go through it that much. I don't even use it that much, but I do believe that if you're still in your early stages of learning, then this would be great for you. Like, it's so convenient, and you know the struggle is already real, so make it convenient with yourself and start it out easy with some GUI. But anyways, now back to the access that we authenticated to. Let's start using some situational awareness commands. And so I organized here kind of a set of situational awareness commands at the top of this sheet. And I'm going to go through them with you one by one and kind of explain them to you. And hopefully you'll find something that you can add to your own methodology. So we already did this, getting the refresh tokens, getting a specific token. This is also valuable if you don't want to make too much noise. Just get what you need and nothing more. And I also put in Sato here, Sato MFA check. This is if any of these don't work, getting the refresh tokens don't work, authenticating to any of the endpoints I showed you don't work, then we can use just a quick Sato MFA check. And what that will do is it'll use all of the scopes like Office, Graph, Management. It will use all of those scopes uh, with the authentication type that you choose. So device code is what I chose here. Device code means that you take a code from the terminal, what it outputs, go to the login page of device code, put that code in, and then sign in. Now, MFA can be applied to different authentication types, and it can be applied to different scopes. And that's why Sato MFA check, I put it here, just in case something doesn't work. I just plug in Sato MFA check, and maybe I'll find, as I did here, that as we'll see in the future of this video, in a little bit, that Office worked for a user, and it worked for device code. And I'll show you how to check that. And then we have MFA gaps. Again, if something doesn't work and there's MFA involved, or if something doesn't work and you're suspicious that there's probably MFA without you seeing it, then we do these checks. And I'm actually going to put this here under MFA, under the MFA part, just to kind of group up MFA stuff together. And connect, we already did that. Should put that here before MFA. And so now we'll get into the actual commands. So get AZ resource. I'm just going to show us the resources. Probably familiar if you did the first lab. So as you can see, we did find a resource, but before we get into this resource, let's go through the rest of the commands and get a little bit of an idea of what it means to get situational awareness. So O365 license. So O365 license is the command to see the license detail of the user. And if that even exists, then that means that the user probably has some emails that you can, try to go into, try to dump, and try to move laterally from there. So I don't believe I put it here, so let me go ahead and plug this bad boy in here too. Email symbol, just in case we find anything. Put in the right user. All right, let's see. So we did not get any license, but in future videos you'll see all about those emails and Teams messages and all that stuff. But yeah, since this didn't work, I'm gonna go ahead and put a lock on it. And let's see what else is next. So, but if it did worked, then we would authenticate to Graph using the correct what's it called? The correct scope, the scope of mail read and sites read all and things like that in order to extract the emails from that user's email since he does have a license. And you can also retrieve emails through other commands, and you can even use a Python script to retrieve emails. You can look this up if you want this script. Personally, you can do that already with mggraph. However, there's no harm in having some redundancy, like I said earlier. And you can also use Graph Runner, a great tool for the graph endpoint, to do that as well. And then here we check Teams messages, but there is no license, like I said. And shares, actually, so let me just go through it just in case you want to see how it would work. Since we did get these tokens over here, where are my tokens? Right, so here, since we did get these tokens, where is it over here? Yeah, here they are. So since we got these tokens, let's go ahead and use this AAD command in order to get the Teams messages, just hypothetically. Unless it works, and I have no clue, but let's see. And the API endpoint that we're going to use for this is called API spaces.skype. So we take the access token whenever we want to do anything with the token, and then we plug it into the command. And it might work, might not. I'm not really sure. So yeah, besides while that's going on, besides that, we also have shares. So for shares, I do use Graph Runner, and that's because doing it manually is just a kind of a bit more work, and so in this case, it's not really about redundancy as much as it is just about convenience. So I have these set of Graph Runner commands that I'm gonna plug in once this is done. Okay, so Teams is disabled in user licenses. So that's probably because he doesn't have a license, but I might be mistaken. But anyways, let's plug in this command for Graph Runner in order to see the shares. So demonstration of device code authentication. You get a device code, and what I did was in my home tab, I just put the device code login page right there. So all I have to do is press a new tab and then get in by clicking that. And since I'm already signed in, should be convenient. There we go. So we got a bunch of shares. I'm not going to download any because they are not the attack path. However, since we got shares, to share with you a little bit about the protocol is you do log into the console, go to the shares themselves, if that's possible. If not, you're going to need to use a few roundabout ways to download the shares alongside any links within them and things like that. But yeah, shares, that's how you get shares. Now, principles. So for principles, roles, and groups, I do recommend, like I said, you can just go through the GUI to get an idea of how that looks like. But see what happened here. All right, it wants us to use AZ with the specific scope of graph. So I'm just going to sign in with a specific scope, and this doesn't exist. Um, So instead of that command that doesn't work, we can just use the getmg command, and this is because getmg is already authenticated to the graph endpoint, so we don't need to use AZ with a special graph scope. And so I just did that right here, and we got our user just fine. And so now let's go ahead and get any role assignments that our user has. So in order to do that, we can just plug in the subscription in this format and then use the command like that, and shared token cache authentication unavailable, token acquisition failed for user. So I don't believe that this user has perms to do that. However, to make sure, let me go ahead and just double check my authentication here. I'm pretty sure it's authenticated just fine. All right, let's move on. So here, let's see if the user has any groups or is in any groups, and we can do that with this command. Go ahead and test it over here. Like I said, all of this information could be reflected in the GUI that I showed you how to make. However, I want to show you the manual CLI version because it's going to be way more critical than looking at the GUI. Looking at 80 users is a bit difficult to go through all of them, so having the CLI awareness and ability will kind of accelerate the speed at which you enumerate. Let's see if we can get the groups. No, we can't. But you know what? Let me show you. Try the MG graph version. And I recommend you do this if you're going to build a little database of commands, is put all the different methods beside each other in the different columns. So here I have the MG graph column, here is the AZ graph column, and then here is mostly, unless I ruin the format, it's the get AZ column. So let's see if this works. Awesome, it does work. That's because we have the graph authentication with no problems. So we are, as you can see, a part of group readers, directory reader, default directory, and all company. So directory readers, it shows you the description already. You know, it can read basic directory information. Default directory is the default one where everybody is in it, and then all company is the one that anybody can join it. And I don't believe it has any authentication or permissions. But if the attack path was in here, I would show you how to enumerate all this. But we're going to move on just because it's not part of the attack path. In other labs, you will enumerate them. And so yeah, don't hesitate to just pause the video or get in there yourself and just explore and enjoy going wherever in the lab. That's really how you learn in the most fun way. But now here, as you can see, we got to organizational units, which is what OU stands for. So for OU, I made a little script here, and I'll show you it. And this script, I made it in because, as you can probably gather, it was a little bit difficult to get what I wanted done in one single command. So let's see if this works. Show you what it does. Until that's done, I'm not sure if it's gonna work. Yeah, it didn't work because there are none for the user, but what it does is it gets the organizational unit that my compromised user belongs to, it gets his ID, and then it gets the roles involved for all the users within the organizational units that my user is in. And so it's just kind of organizational unit enumerator. Find ownership of any group. This is also important because it leads to attack paths. So you can go ahead and use this one as well. See if our user owns any groups. If our compromised user owns a group and there's something that they could do to the users in the group, like change their passwords, or if the group that our user owns has like special perms and he's not even in it for whatever reason, now we know that we can join that group and we can get in on those perms that the group has or the role that it's associated with. Right, and so this is using AZ, and I think I'll make one for MG in the future, but yeah, that's what it would have done if AZ was working here in our authentication scheme. So now a little bit of tooling. So I have here Graph Runner, and Graph Runner is great as I showed you for caps. So Road Recon was what we use for the caps, but also you can use Graph Runner. And you can also use Graph Runner to automate a bunch of things for accessing the Graph API. However, Road Recon is vastly superior due to the GUI that I showed you. Azure Hound is great if you like Bloodhound. It does give you a Bloodhound view with a little bit of custom queries. You can make it probably the same as the Bloodhound functionality. But for me personally, like if I'm not going to be using Road Recon, I'm definitely not going to be using Bloodhound. Like the problem with Bloodhound is it only shows you paths in regards to, I believe, two specific elements of two principles or something. And that's just insufficient. Like I already make my maps and I map out everything. So why would I kind of dumb that down into just two principles at a time? However, Azure Hound is a immensely an incredible tool if all you have is a refresh token and you don't know or not you don't know, but you don't want to go through all the enumeration. Perhaps you have very limited time. You can use a refresh token into Azure Hound and it'll dump everything that could ever be accessed. And it dumps it in a very tragic format. However, it's better than nothing if you're like stuck on time or something. The exams on Pwn Labs are 24 hours, and I did I did the cyber range on Pwn Labs for AWS, and I could say with confidence that the exam was harder in a shorter amount of time. And if you did that cyber range, you know how huge it is. So now let's move on here. By the way, if you want to format your Azure Hound output, you can just do a little JQ on it real quick. So service principals are associated with applications, websites, things like that, services. Like in AWS, you could think of it as like a functions role, a Lambda function or something like that. The services that need roles in order to access resources, in order for operations in the infrastructure to go on. So I didn't put a one-off command. However, I did put some commands here, but however, I have some instructions, general instructions for if you are dealing with a service principal. You get the ID, you get the service principal rather from the client ID, and you try to find the role assignments of that service principal, and you also try to find permissions of roles within OUs, organizational units that you're in, or any associated like uh, any associated principal that the service principal has access to. And for the last couple things I put here for situational awareness, portal access. Portal access is going to be huge because in Azure there are a lot of things that you do which are a bit difficult to do if you are just on the CLI. However, if you have portal access and there's no problem accessing the portal and the console of Azure, you can do a lot of things and kind of make things easy for yourself. And it's critical for situations where there are links in emails and things like that, or if you're trying to get a session, a session such as sometimes access is provided in sessions, and so you need portal access for that as well. And there are a bunch of things that are just way more conveniently done through the portal. When you're thinking of attack paths that involve human mistakes and attack paths that involve the actual humans involved in the engagement, such as somebody has to send an email in such and so format or a Teams message to the IT in order for the IT to make changes to their account, and the IT has emailed them a PDF instructing them on how to do that. You can't really do all of those things in the CLI, and so portal access is critical. Not only that, but if you're learning, I highly recommend to always check the portal access to just get familiar with the Azure kind of infrastructure and format. It's much different than AWS, and it's unique, and there's no harm in exploring. It will always make you a better hacker. So user agent bypass, like I said before, I have here PlayStation because it works. And then Azure Privileged Identity Management, PIM, is what I just talked about. It gives you sessional access, and this is done through the portal. So now that I've covered the kind of protocols of situational awareness, let's go ahead and get back to the lab and go through the attack path. So earlier we found some resources, and as you can see here, the group of this resource called ext contractors is content static 2. And I put them both here for a reason because the commands that we use involve both of them. And so if we go ahead and copy paste this command, it will yield us some information of what we found, which is a key vault, as you can see from the symbol. And this key vault has this subscription ID, and it has this vault URI, and it's involved with this tenant ID. The tenant ID is accessible publicly, And the Vault URI is something that you can use if you are going to make native API calls. And the subscription the resource ID rather, is something that you can use in scripting if you're going to be scripting using libraries in PowerShell and whatnot. So that's just a little bit of rundown on gathering just basic info of a key vault. Now that we have the key vault name, let's go ahead and see if we can list the secrets of the key vault. So key vaults, as you can probably tell from the name, have secrets. And so here in this case, we have 3 secrets. I put them here in the diagram. We have Elisa, Josh, and Ryan. And I already listed the values of these secrets, but let me go ahead and use the commands for you so you can see them as well. Here are... Alright, there's a problem with AZ. Okay, let's restart our PowerShell. So the AZ library commands are kind of malfunctioning right now, so I'm just going to use the get AZ commands. And so I have all the commands here for getting these secrets. As you can see, for Elisa, we got the secret of welcome123, and for the rest of them, for Josh, we get this random string. And lastly, for Ryan, we have this also random string. So now that we have these strings, which are most likely kind of passwords or something, we could spray, and we could also kind of check our users in order to see if any of the users match, and thus we can authenticate to them. And so spraying I covered in the first lab. If you want to check out how to do that, then please check out that lab. I'll link it in the description and put it somewhere on the screen in the beginning of the or the back or the end of the video. But it is associated with this lab because it reaches us the initial access. Anyways, that being said, let's go ahead and do the method of checking our GUI to see if any users match. So here back at Road Recon, let's go to users. And now let's show all the users. And then let's search for these users. So let's search for Elisa. Nothing comes up. Search Josh. Josh comes up as a consultant here at Mega Big Tech. And so this methodology is kind of very quick and cheap. More appropriately, you would, use some sort of scripting in order to make sure that you don't miss anything. We got like 80 principles. You can easily skip over if you're just relying on your eyes. But if you did the standard protocol of, like you'll see in the previous lab that we covered, there is a protocol where you dump all the users, you spray, and all of that jazz. It's all in that lab if you want to check it out. But anyways, we have Josh Harvey here, and it matches this user, Josh Harvey, and we have a secret for Josh Harvey. So now we have an email and a password for us to try out. So with that, we can use this tool that is unfortunately currently malfunctioning. But anyways, after getting any kind of indication that this user exists, we spray, we try to get access, and once we do, we now have knowledge of a valid compromised user. So what do we do when we get a valid compromised user? Well, just like the beginning of the video I covered, we get situational awareness again, and I'll show you how that's done instead of showing you the commands again. Basically, what we did was we were able to connect with AZ account, as I'll show you here. Let's just restart the PowerShell. Go ahead and authenticate to Josh. I already have his creds put in, so just authenticates right away. And as you can see here, when I try to authenticate to Graph, you have this lock symbol because it doesn't work. And I'll show you why once I just get in here. So after we authenticate to the management API, we utilize the same enumeration techniques in order to find out what this user is for, what his role is at work, and what resources he has for us to attack. And with that in mind, in this case, it's a very simple command. We use the get AZ resource again to see that he has access to a lot of resources. And we'll get into the attack path again, but there's something critical that I want to share before we get into that. We were not able to connect to mggraph. And when you're not able to connect to something, it's not a matter of, okay, well, I can't go here. Let me just try to go here. This is an attack path that we haven't yet exhausted. And so how do we exhaust this attack path? Well, clearly, if there's something preventing us from getting into mggraph, it's probably going to be an access control policy, um, a conditional access policy, a cap. And when it's a cap, it's most likely multi-factor authentication. And so when we can't access an endpoint like this, a critical one like Graph, we're going to have to commence the protocol of trying to see what's going on and trying to bypass multi-factor authentication. And for that, I made a template, just like I made a template for standard authentication. I made a template for multi-factor authentication that we're going to talk about for a little bit, and then I'll show you how we actually do it. So here we have the actual user, MFA blocked user. So we have MFA blocked user. We can't get in. We tried to get in. It's asking us for a code or something. It's asking us to check our phone or something. So what do? Well, firstly, do we have access to the conditional access policies? Well, if we do, then we can look straight away what is preventing us. We can see the policies of the user and see what's going on. So Road Recon does that for us. Road Recon, the caps file that I showed you earlier, that might have this user that we can't get into, and it'll show us his conditional access policy. So let's go ahead and look at that. So here is the user, and if we go to the caps file, let's go ahead and search for Josh. We have Josh in here for MFA, Josh Harvey Contractor. So here's our user, and let me explain what we can do with him and what we can't. It says right here that MFA is applied on all 365 applications. It's applied on all platforms. And the most critical, it's applied on browsers, mobile and desktop apps, legacy clients, and Exchange Active Sync. And so overall, the gist is that we are dealing with multi-factor authentication. And if that's the case, if we have caps over here, and you can see the caps, that there is most likely caps and things that we can't see. And I'll show you what that is in the future. But before we get into what the precise problem is, let's go ahead and commence the little protocol of trying to see what's going on and getting through MFA. So firstly, after seeing that we're blocked, we can't get into Graph, Well, in that case, we should use Sado. This is not the symbol for Sado. I just made it up. But Sado is used to utilize any device, any authentication scheme with any predefined scope. So that means you're going to try all services with all authentication schemes until you find one that yields what you want, which is a refresh token. And I'll explain why we want a refresh token in a bit, but basically the gist is, just like I showed you with the tokens, once you get a refresh token, you can access anything that you want, including what you got blocked by, which is graph. So let's go ahead and get these commands for Sado. So I just made these commands to quickly go to the Sado directory, turn on PowerShell, and then import the module in order to start using Sado. And then after that's done, we're going to go ahead and initiate all of these commands. So taking these Sado commands that try to get tokens out of every single scope. It's unfortunate that it isn't automated in one single command, but it is what it is. We just paste them all in here and we see what works. So here we have a block by a multi-factor authentication. So this one didn't work. So what do? Just cancel it and we go to the next one. Didn't work. And as you can see here, the third one worked. And we have a access token and a refresh token. And so the reason why is because this particular endpoint, I really want to be able to tell you because of this specific conditional access policy. But the fact of the matter is that not only can we not see all the policies in place, we actually cannot see all the policies in place through the tools that allow us to see some caps. Not only that, but also that I have confirmed with current penetration testers and red teamers that Azure policies are not very reliable. I mean, even the bootcamp instructor that's teaching us how to hack Azure has also said it that Azure policies are just a little bit confusing. And so now that we have this access token and refresh token, let's take a look at what the next tool to use is. And it's something that I already showed you. Over here, we're going to use find me access in order to utilize this refresh token. So we're going to paste this command, take the refresh token, and with this refresh token, we should start getting all the tokens. As you can see, from having a block, from getting blocked, we have now went around that in order to get all the tokens, or rather not all of them. As you can see, we have a few of them that we are unable to get. And so that's strange. Let's see if we can get the critical one that blocked us. And so right here, it would appear the graph token. However, like I said, there is a reason as to why this doesn't work. But before we get into that reason, let's do one last thing. I shared earlier that you can use Azure Hound in order to utilize the Graph API, even when the only thing that you have is the refresh token. And I have confirmed that I have confirmed with a current Azure pen tester that sometimes using Azure Hound on a refresh token completely bypasses uh, control access policies on Graph. So let's go ahead and use this token. So unfortunately, it didn't work. However, I just wanted to show you, what the protocol is that I've gathered. What have I gathered from speaking to professionals that are doing this particular thing, and kind of getting explanations from people that have been doing this for years in this particular infrastructure. And so that's the kind of the protocol that we use. Is we try to get around, we see which scope, we see which API endpoint doesn't have MFA, we see which device, we see which authentication method is allowed, doesn't have MFA, through both looking at the caps that we have access to, but also through brute forcing method and tooling, and using all of our resources and all of our arsenal in order to get through the multi-factor authentication. However, what is the real problem here? Why were we not allowed to do it? Well, like I said, after speaking with the lab instructor and developer, there is a cap, there is a policy in the target resources, the target resources, that explicitly, specifically says nobody's allowed to use this account to access Graph. And that's the problem with this and why we were not able to do it. It's because Graph was targeted and preventing everybody from accessing it. So with that little bit of MFA action, just to kind of give you a glimpse, in future labs we will be bypassing MFA in so many different ways. But for now, let's go back into the simple attack path and go back here. So we connected. Get my PowerShell out. So we connected, we found a bunch of resources, but obviously we're not going to check every single resource. Instead of that, let's just check what we can do and find the attack path much faster than going through every single thing. If you want to do that, that's great. It's great to explore. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and see what our scope is if we have any role assignments. So we can't see that, and that's because the authentication on this guy, the access on this guy does not allow that. I'm pretty sure. Wait, let me check. So in the previous account, we should have gotten the group name and the associated roles. And this is because in the previous account, we had a little bit more access and we could do so. So I'm going to do that with you guys right now before we start enumerating this new account that we got. So in here, we just connect back into the MG graph for the previous user, and then with that we go ahead and look up the user, and we get the, as you can see here, MG user member of the new user that we found. And by doing that, we find here customer database access has this ID. So go ahead and copy that. And then so after going back to that previous account, getting the group name and understanding that this new user is in this group, we can then authenticate into it and utilize its own access to the groups. And by doing so, we can then enumerate this group alongside the other groups to get the role assignments for any groups or users that this current user has access to seeing the roles and groups of. And so as you can see here, if we take a look at the customer database access group, we can see that the role's name is customer database access, the same except with spaces instead of dashes. And so now using this role name, we can then get the definition of it. And with the definition, we'll be able to see what that role provides as a role that has permissions. So the key thing over here is that if you can see this data actions portion, it shows this Microsoft storage, storage accounts, table services, tables, entities, read. So long story short, this means that we are allowed to read tables and table services, meaning storage accounts that are of the table version or type. And there's no specification of which storage. That means we can read all tables in I believe the content static 2 group. And so let's do that over here. As you can see, I listed and symbolized the data action that shows us what we can do with that. Right, and before we move forward, let's talk a little bit again about storage. I know if you did the previous lab, then you'll probably already know all about storages through the fact that you probably hacked it in order to finish the lab. However, again, I just want to reiterate, blobs can be of different types. Storages can be of different types. You can get blob storage, you can have a queue storage, a table storage, a file storage, static web apps as a storage service, and CDN endpoints. And each of these will have files formatted differently. So in what we're dealing with, the table storage, it provides a NoSQL key value storage type of format. Just kind of some theory for you to use in the future. And so with that in mind, we can make the correct, we can make the command here in order to list the containers in the storage. So, not sure what happened there, but anyways, oh right, we used two commands. So here I just put the two commands to show you just kind of a redundancy that we can do things in both ways. And if one of them didn't work, then possibly the other one you would have access through, because of the difference in kind of the APIs and the difference with the access that the tokens have and the scopes that are associated, and etc. So here, as you can see, we got 3 containers. And so I kind of drew them out over here, these 3 containers. And I didn't go through all of them. I'm just going to show you going through the critical path of it. We went through cust database, which is the customer database. And in the command, I just want to note one thing about it, which is that when you're using the commands for storages or whatever service or thing it is, the key factor is just to um, engineer the command to suit the variation. So in this case, it's a table storage. And so we have az storage table list. And so putting this in here, we see that the uh, customers over here is the blob within the container. And so customers probably has some customer data. Let's check it out. Let's retrieve the internal contents of this blob. That is not the right command. And we got the information of the customers alongside the flag if you do this and then you scroll down. And so this has been the lab. I hope you learned anything, and if you have any questions, just shoot me a message anywhere in any social media, and I'll be happy to explain or talk about security in any domain, really. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. And if you haven't seen the video leading to this video, which provides this initial access, take a look at that too to see how we got to these credentials. I'll leave a link for that. And thank you very much, and see you later.